party to my page too, so we get extra views.
Yeah.
For those
so it's trying to connect. So we should be live in just a minute.
To do it in that fancy things. I'll probably do something where we'll get like double echo and ruin everything. So I'm not touching a thing.
No, I can, as of now, I can hear everything just fine.
Okay, so we should be live. Does it say live on your end? Because mine it takes a second.
Live.
We are live. Okay, we're live. Okay. Hello, I'm Jessica Buck, Adult Services Librarian, and I'm joined by Teen Librarian Cathy Janovitz. We are so happy to welcome you to the Escondido Public Library Virtual Author Chat Series. The series is sponsored by the Friends of the Escondido Public Library and in partnership with the Rift Bodice Bookstore.
So in this series, we will be talking to authors of all genres and covering topics from diversity and representation to the world of publishing and writing. Today, we will be speaking with authors Sonali Dev and Suzanne Park about their upcoming releases. We'll also chat about representation and diversity in the romance genre. Before Jessica introduces our authors, we want you to know that during this chat, we will be monitoring the comments. So if you have any questions about what we're talking about, or you have questions for either of the authors or the fabulous librarians, please feel free to add those to the comments and we will try to get those answered as soon as we can.
Sweet, thank you. Okay, so our wonderful authors, let's start with Sonali Dev, is a USA Today best-selling author who writes Bollywood-style love stories that let her explore issues faced by women around the world while still indulging in her faith in a happily ever after. Sonali's novels have been on Library Journal, NPR, Washington Post, and Kirkus Books Best Books of the Year lists. She has won the American Library Association's Award for Best Romance, the RT Reviewer Choice Award for Best Contemporary Romance, multiple RT Seals of Excellence, and a Rita finalist, and has been listed for the Dublin Literary Award. Shelf Awareness calls her not only one of the best, but one of the bravest romance novelists working today. She lives in Chicagoland with her very patient and often amused husband and two teens who demand both patience and humor, and the world's most perfect dog, which is adorable, and you can see photos on her Instagram, just saying. Recipe for Persuasion is her most recent book and is available everywhere books are sold, and you can check it out from the library. Okay, our next author, right, woohoo! Suzanne Park is a Korean-American writer who was born and raised in Tennessee. In her former life as a stand-up comedian, Suzanne was a finalist in the Oxygen Network's Girls Behaving Badly talent search and appeared on BET's Coming to the Stage. She found this to be the funniest thing in her comedy career because, well, she is not Black. She was also the winner of the Seattle Sierra Mist comedy competition and was a semifinalist in NBC's Stand Up for Diversity showcase in San Francisco. Suzanne graduated from Columbia University and received an MBA degree from UCLA. So cool. She was selected for Pitch Wars and is represented by Brent Taylor of, I think it's Triada US Literary Agency. She currently resides in LA with her husband, female offspring, and a sneaky rat that creeps around her back patio. In her spare time, she procrastinates. Her YA romantic comedy debut, The Perfect Escape, released, April 7th, 2020, and is a Fall Junior Library Guild selection. Her adult rom-com, Loathe at First Sight, comes out August 18th, 2020, and has already been rated a top romance novel to read this summer by BuzzFeed. There we go.
That's the event. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Need some water after those introductions. Okay, so let's get on to some of our questions. This is going to be a bit of a chat, so if you guys just want to talk to each other and ignore us, that's totally cool. If anyone on Facebook has questions, just feel free to put those in the comments and we'll try to get to them. So the first question is, tell us about your books. Who wants to start? Let's go with Suzanne.
Oh, okay, sure. This is my young adult novel. It's she's gonna bring it up too. It's this one. It came out recently, and it's about a Korean American protagonist. His name is Nate Kim, and he meets his dream girl at the zombie escape room where he works. They both find that they have a desperate need for money, so they decide to enter a survivalist competition together that has a huge cash prize. A weekend out in the elements, surviving what could possibly go wrong, right? So that is my young adult book. And then this book is coming out in August. It's my adult rom-com debut. This one is about a video game junior producer. Her name is Melody Ju, and she is tasked with releasing a controversial video game. And she's antagonized by everyone around her, especially the MBA intern who happens to be the CEO's nephew. So that is this book.
And I am currently reading this book, which is why I'm squinting, because I haven't been able to put it down and I can't see at all. I'm like, I hope everyone can see me because I can't see anything. It's so funny. I will tell you that there are parts in this book when I was like a hyena. I mean, I don't drink anything while you're reading most of this book because you will choke and die. And then Melody will have a good laugh at your expense. So it's just so delightful. And I have so many questions because I was like, is it Asher? Is it Nolan? Like, which one is it? And I still, oh my goodness, don't do this to me. Don't do this to me. Okay, so my book, that's Recipe for Persuasion. And it is my homage to Jane Austen's Persuasion. And when I say it's my homage, it literally is my homage. It is, if you're looking for a retelling where you're going to be looking for scenes from the original Persuasion or one-to-one character matches, you're not going to find that. It simply is, and I hope that we'll get to talk about that a little more. It is also part of this this lifelong dream series that I'm trying to do, which is my 4 favorite Austen novels under one story umbrella. So while they are standalones, I always dreamt of telling these stories as part of this one story universe. So this one is the Persuasion story, naturally, and what it is it's set on a Food Network show called Cooking with the Stars that my heroine, who's a chef, gets sucked into because she's trying to save her dead father's dying restaurant. And of course, she's the chef, and the celebrity she gets paired with is I'm sorry, that's my child.
Hi, child.
Sorry, is her first love, and he has who believes she dumped him under familial pressure, and he goes off because he was a nobody, and he goes off and becomes a Premier League World Cup winning football star in Europe, and he has recently retired and is back to get closure, and so
It's so good.
It is so good.
Yeah, and it's as much, and there's this whole, it's also a 2-generational retelling of or examination of Persuasion, because it's also her mother's story. So it's as much a love story between Ashna and her mom as it is between Ashna and Rico.
The conflict you set up, I've never seen anything so artfully done. So kudos to that. When it started to roll into the Food Network stuff, I was like, oh, this is just hilarious and perfect. And their chemistry is just fantastic.
Thank you. It is, I always, I'm kind of waiting to write a book where the stakes aren't do or die. Like, I feel like my books are almost like the stakes are so high, I can't breathe when I'm writing them. And, you know, and I do get that a lot from readers. Like, the angst is dialed all the way, you know, up there. And yeah, I think every single book I've written, it's like the stakes are too high. And I'm told that's not a thing. But it sometimes, like, by the time I'm done with these books, I kind of, you know, need a vacation. And when I'm writing them, I need a vacation. I just need a vacation because everything is, you know, is yeah, the stakes. So thank you.
Okay, should we move on to another question, or do you guys want to chat some more? Whatever you want to do.
Suzanne, should we chat for a bit?
Let me grab your other book or your first book. Hold on 1 second.
Okay, and while she's gone, I don't know if she can still hear me. Can you still hear me? There were a few things that I, you know, that I wanted to talk about, and one of the things that's funny and I don't want to laugh at is so much of the humor is her parents. And, you know, and being an immigrant parent of American-born children, it hits pretty hard because, you know, while generationally there's a difference, and I like to believe that, you know, I'm not that culturally separated from my children, but it was hilarious. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she's making me break my rule of not laughing at, you know, people making fun of their immigrant parents, because it's such a part of our life. Have your parents read this? What do they feel about that?
Not this. They read the young adult, which has a totally different set of parents and their immigrant parents. So it's you know, I played the humor a little bit differently, but with this one, what I think is key about immigrant parents and humor is to not make fun of certain aspects, you know, that make them look but basically dumb
Silly.
or whatever, you know, something that is just a negative thing, but it really is like their view on society or their view of the world and of being a parent and, you know, what values they want to instill. And that's where I find the humor, is just making sure that it's clear that they have different priorities than you, and they will not, it's a dog with a bone, they will not let it go. And I, you know, hopefully people appreciate the humor, even if you aren't from, don't have family that is from a different country. Hopefully people will understand just parental pressure in general, just about whether it's finding your right career or marrying the right person. That's all hopefully relatable.
Yeah, and making fun of your parents is one of the great joys, you know, in the world. It's like we've all done it.
Yes, it's sort of like when you come to this country, you're allowed to have that.
I grew up in the same country that my parents grew up in. We made fun of our parents all the time. But I have seen this thing where you know, where every single American-born Indian person that I know, when they start talking about their parents, they switch to this entirely like overdone Indian accent, which is, you know, horrifying. And it always makes me go, you know, that. And of course, you know, our kids do it too. And we're like, come on, like, in which world do we sound like that? But I get not taking that away from them. You guys can make fun of us. That's allowed. But it was funny. It was incredibly funny. Her mom was just, you know, I kept thinking about my own mom, and I had, you know, tears. It was hilarious.
It's like happy tears, right? No,
I mean, just, yes, funny. It's the scene that I posted on Twitter where with her mom talking about her having, you know, removed her uterus when she was, or dragged her uterus.
Oh my gosh, I saw you posted that.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I actually like was shrieking in the middle of the night, and my husband is like, what is going on? I'm like, this is so funny. It's brilliant.
Yes, my mom also blames me for her lactose intolerance, but that is a whole different story. That
I can
lots of history there.
That's great. That is just great. I can, I have a lot of allergies. I should try that.
Maybe.
I do blame them for every single gray hair, but.
So my question for you is, how did you connect the characters? How did you get the idea did you already know when you wrote this book what the next book would be like? And how did you decide to thread them together? And what was that process like?
So, as I said, when I envisioned the books, I envisioned them as 4 books. So, that would start with this, with the gubernatorial race being announced. And so for those who don't know about the books, this, they're set they're all set in this politically ambitious Indian American family in the San Francisco Bay Area. And their oldest son is running, and they're descended from Indian royalty. And their oldest son is, as one is, there are a lot of Indian royals. So it actually is, a thing. But their oldest son is running for California governor. And the first book was always going to kick off with that announcement. And the last book is going to, of course, end with the results being announced. And so that was kind of always my grand, overreaching arc. And so also when I first, I had been thinking about this. I don't know if you do this, but I kind of get an idea and then for years it's somewhere in my head, it's bouncing around. And so I actually wrote down those ideas in December of 2013. I had just sold my first book. It hadn't come out. I had just sold Bollywood Affair early that year. It was going to come out the next November. I had an agent and so I wrote these ideas out. And, since I had an agent, I showed them to her. Of course, she's not my agent now, but at the time, because she quit agenting, of course, a month before my first book came out. But she said, oh, but Austin doesn't sell. And so, we're not going to do that. And not even for a second did she dissuade me. So I always knew I was going to do this no matter what anybody else thought. And, that first thing, the bio that you read, which said, called me brave. I think it's a code word for stupid, because, it's, you do what you want to do, right? Or at least that's kind of what, how I've always approached this career. And of course, it makes it very hard for you because anytime you say, I'm going to do what I want to do, everything will come at you and say, oh, we'll see. But I digress. So I had in 2013 written down the concepts, and I mean like handwritten 1-page concepts for all 4 books. So I always knew, that the first book, and that stuff changed, but I always knew the protagonists and the conflicts across. And that was easy given that they are existing novels. So I knew something about it. Like I knew that Pride, Prejudice, and Other Flavors was going to be a gender flipped Darcy and Elizabeth. And that Recipe for Persuasion was going to be set on this Food Network game show. And so, yes, as I was writing, I didn't know details, but I did know at least the concepts of all 4 of them when I started them.
Great.
Yeah, they change on you, of course. I mean, I think my first vision of Rico was, he wasn't Rico, he was going to be an NFL star. And then there's many, many reasons why that did not work for me. And yeah. So are you, no, I shouldn't ask you, I should read to the end, but I'm just dying to know, did you do that? Okay, don't tell me who it's going to be, but, but did you plan that? Did you plan for the readers to question whether it's going to be, because the name of the book is Loath at First Sight. And the person she loathes the most is Asher. Yeah. And so I'm thinking it has to be Asher. And but how are you going to redeem him?
There is a lot of loathing all around, hence the title. Obviously, there's a enemies to lovers thread, but there's also a lot of just the gaming industry being so toxic in several different aspects. I just had to bring that up again, and it's in the title. So there's a lot of people making first, just judgments and first impressions, not really giving people a chance, that sort of thing in the book. But I did bring up characters that, to make sure that there was a little bit of guessing, because I don't, sometimes it's, a lot of books have it very clear from the beginning what's going to happen. And, my books usually take some twisty turns. So I won't tell you who it is or how it's resolved, but there is a happily ever after.
Yeah, yes. I mean, yeah, I will hunt you down if there isn't, because I'm just enjoying it so much. I did, and I try, when I read books, I try not to read the, the back cover copy. Sometimes I just want to go in blind and I kind of want to follow the story. And so I was doing that with this book, but I broke. Like I had to go back and I'm like, let me see who is mentioned in the, who's mentioned in the back cover copy. And then that will give me an idea. And after I read that, I saw Nolan's character differently until so that's really interesting too, how the back cover copy changes how, you're processing a story.
Yes. And what you probably know too, being a author of color, is sometimes you just can't capture all of the aspects of the character journey, and the plot and the layering in marketing copy. When you're reading it, it might be a different experience. So that is one thing that I've found interesting about being an author of color in publishing, is that you get these sound bites and things, and they really don't always just fully encompass what the story's about, especially if it is a own voices story. You end up there's some connection there, and from the author to the main character, and the sometimes that isn't all the parts of the story aren't in the back cover, and then
it's impossible. Yeah.
So
impossible.
It's very, I don't want to say superficial, but it's very top level. And then when you actually read it, like the Sonalis have so much layering and depth that there's no way you could capture that in just a little 3-paragraph page of copy.
Yeah, and I hate doing that. I think that's my least, that's almost every author's least favorite thing, is to try and kind of, condense that down. I heard, I remember hearing a story about Nora Roberts, who once wrote an entire novel because someone asked her to write a synopsis. Because she preferred to write the whole novel than a synopsis, so they would see what the book is about. And I would never be able to do that. but it almost feels like, it's impossible. And you're right. I think specifically also, I think when publishers are trying to glean the essence and trying to, because there's this whole dance that you have to do with own voices books. You have to convince people that it's just like you and you're going to totally relate, but hey, it's going to be this lovely journey that you have never had before. So it's all of this stuff that they're trying to sell, because it's not an existing space, on the shelf. And because they're trying to do all that, there's often the buzzwords that have to be thrown in. I'm surprised they don't have like K-pop and Korean drama and all that thrown into your into your back cover copy, because that whole thing is about bite-sized chunks of what you're getting, and it's it's this interesting little dolphin clicking that has to happen that makes people pick up the book. And it is interesting to see how it's done with our books. But speaking of Korean dramas and food, because this is something that happens when you think of Indian American books and Korean American books, they the thing that people are automatically relating it to in the back of their minds is these two very large cultural phenomena. So Bollywood, K-dramas, right? Indian food, Korean food. And so you're going into this space where the palettes are coated with all this past information. And, how does that work with your process, or does that at all impact, you and when you were selling and writing?
When I was writing these books, I've always had the idea that I wanted to write a book that I would want to read. And there's so many good books out there that do cover the sort of the divide between the Korean and American culture and people that fall in between. But my books mostly center on other issues, not primarily race. So sometimes, I think for the most part, I do focus on classism, prejudice, as well as, privilege, and not necessarily race and culture clashes as the primary thing that I would like to talk about. It does come up though, naturally. You can't not talk about that almost, because a lot of it is how people see you and how the world sees you. And so that is always brought in. I do usually mention food, because how can you not? But but I do want to make sure that you don't always, as a voices writer, as a person of color, you don't always have to write about pain. And that is one thing that, I, as a stand-up comic, there's a lot of comedy to be had that doesn't necessarily fit around, it has to be around the same types of issues. I can hopefully try to explore and bring other perspectives to Korean American books that you might not see in other books. How about you?
And I think the humor is, and I say this all the time, that I don't want to write poverty porn, and I don't want to write immigrant angst. And by that, I mean, I don't want those to be the central themes ever of my books. I want it to be about stuff these characters are missing, and growth, and, getting over trauma, and I keep wanting to write a really funny book. And this is what happens to me. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, the angst. And I think because I want to talk to you about writing humor also, because what's really funny about Recipe for Persuasion is, I mean, they had it. I don't know if it was the time we were in, when it was just it is just such a dark time. And also the fact that just before that, rom-coms had become, the thing. And so there were words in my, in my original back cover copy that like rollicking, I'm like, nobody is rollicking in this book. Like, I don't think rollicking is a book that, is a word that applies to Recipe for Persuasion. There is some humor and some,
Yeah.
But it's really strange, because I have both those reactions. I have, people who have, I have had someone do, a lot of people do reviews, but one specifically of someone who's been a fan through all my books, and she loved the book, and she specifically ends the review with, I would have given this book 5 shiny stars, but I'm taking away a star because they marketed it as a rom-com, and it is not a rom-com. And and a lot of warnings that this is marketed as a rom-com, but there is a lot of really dark stuff in here. So if you're going in expecting it to be a haha rom-com, know that there's a lot of darkness. And so there's been that side, or just people saying, oh my gosh, like this went to places that, really helped me because I could relate to a lot of the trauma, which is all great. But on the other hand, I have like a whole bunch of reviews which are like, this was so fun, and and I was laughing out loud, and I'm thinking, how are those two things working? And I mean, there are some that there's the voice can be light, and there's always some of that. So it's really weird how people read it too.
I totally agree. I'm glad you brought this up. I think there is rom-com, for some reason, the last year, especially maybe 2 years, has broadened to encompass a lot. So you have things that are mostly rom and very little com, to a lot of com, not very much rom. And it's and then there's books like yours that have a lot of depth to them, that when it has to be distilled into 1 or 2 things, it maybe that's where they focused on was what was the word that they used on the back? Rollicking. Yes, they focused on the rollicking. And there are rollicking moments, especially between the main character and Rico, but I think I wish there was a clearer definition, especially now with so many rom-coms coming out. What is a rom-com, like maybe a heat level, sort of something that kind of indicates really where it should be placed, because a lot of this, I guess, contemporary romance, romantic comedies, and women's fiction are sort of all put together, because looks wise, a lot of them have illustrated covers, and they all have the same type of catchy phrases in the marketing side. So I think I would love to have more distinction, because especially the boom in the last few years has really made it broaden to a point where maybe it could get its own category. I wish.
But you know what? Although I've seen a lot of people get very angry also about this. So there are two things, and one is that I have always considered. I mean, rom-coms are my favorite film genre. I love them.
Yes.
There is just something that just puts you together. I mean, you could you walk away from that feeling hopeful and lovely, and it is my absolute favorite genre. And I've always thought of it as, and not all of them are laugh out loud, even if they are. Every single rom-com that I love has a very dark underlayer to it, whether it's While You Were Sleeping, or it is which is the one, not Friends with, I know there are two that are that are almost identical in theme, and there's one that I love and one that I don't like
The one
that
with
much.
Justin Timberlake or the one with Ashton Kutcher?
I like the one with Ashton Kutcher.
There you
go. And what is her name?
That was love it.
Natalie Portman.
Natalie Portman. I was going to say Naomi Campbell, but yeah, no, Natalie Portman. Now, this is my aging brain. But I mean, really dark underlying, again, trauma of abandonment, really bad parenting, loneliness, grief. Like, those are the things that are very much part of all. Sleepless in Seattle. I mean, all of these are, the classic fabulous rom-coms, and they all have really dark underlayers. So I have, it's always felt like that to me. But I think what it has done specifically for us, and by us I mean Own Voices authors in romance, is it's given me a home. I mean, I will tell you, when I was with my first 4 books, I was they were marketed as women's fiction / contemporary romances, but given our vocabulary back then, they were very much contemporary romances. However, they weren't for the readers, because 5 years ago, completely different readership, completely different market, completely different industry, right? I mean, it's amazing how much this world has changed in just 5 years. And so back then, if you gave somebody a book with a character who was not white, they automatically felt displaced almost, which was absolutely ridiculous, but it was 200 years of training. And so it was like we had no place. We're trying to, create this space on the shelf. But if you don't have a white man chest and, a white back, or, whatever, if you didn't have that, or you didn't have, a shopaholic white heroine, like if you didn't have all of that, people did not, my favorite dolphin clique relate, they found that unrelatable. So then the check boxing happened, which was like, oh, I've read one, so I'm done. I've read Beverly Jenkins, so I've done my, I have read diverse books. I've read, I've read Bollywood Affair, and so I'm done. I've read a Sonali Dev. And so when you're reading year after year after year after year, books that are coming out from authors who are giving you relatable stuff. And so when this rom-com thing happened, for me personally, I felt like, oh, now I have a home, because what it is it is a romance, but it's set within a community and a world. So there is another, that just anchors the story, but there's more. And I felt like what it has, and publishers used it pretty smartly for a while to do that, to subvert, all of that by just tweaking the label. So then people were more hungry and more open and willing to take that story and say, oh, not contemporary romance, rom-com. And so you can break my concepts down a little. And I know a lot of people who support diversity, who just get really angry with this whole, you're cheating us with those covers, and they get really angry. And I understand, but I think it doesn't pay heed to how this has helped own voices authors and how this has helped diverse authors, because people's mindset has, just with that change of label, I think, opened up a little bit and made space for us a little bit. And the illustrated covers were, not having a colored person on the page, which is all this ridiculousness, which was the norm. And so giving us, these covers kind of has allowed us to subvert a little bit of those, walls, or navigate those walls. And so there is something to be said for creating, so it's not as simple as you're lying to us, there's no comedy in this. I think that a rom-com really is just a lens that is a little far away to encompass a larger community around the love story.
Related to this, I've found that coming up with comp titles has also been interesting. From when you talk to any author of color, how do you find a book or two or a movie or two that really is exactly like yours, but slightly different? And if your own voices and you aren't writing something so mainstream that, it's not exactly Bridget Jones, or it's not exactly something that everybody has read, it's challenging too. So trying to kind of help show that you're offering something different, but it's also very marketable. How do you come up with that with two things that it's exactly like? And that's also has always been a challenge for me.
Yeah. So who do you, because yes, absolutely. Like I've had to think so hard, especially when I start, as again, rom-com has happened, it's a little bit easier to find, the Christina Lawrence and Jasmine Guillory's, and, so there is Helen Wong. And so now there is a little bit more to place as, comps next to our books. But whom did you use?
I can't remember, because I changed the pitch a few times. I think Bridget Jones, inspired by, that sort of language, was in the original one. I think toward the end we used fans of, and it was fans of The Hating Game and fans of Jasmine Guillory's books. And thought that was as close as I can get to a comp title, because there really is nothing about video games, a woman in the video game industry, a workplace romantic comedies. There's not a ton of them out there.
Yeah, so talk about that some, and I do think you're absolutely spot on with especially, it very much has a Hating Game vibe, and it very much has that Jasmine and Sally Thorne vibe to it. But tell me about the video game thing. Are you a gamer? Is it?
I used to be more of a gamer before I had a child, and to a point where I would finish games. I think I finished right before I gave birth Katamari Damacy, hours and hours of playing this game, and finished it and saw the end credits to actually prove that you finished the game. And then now I just do Nintendo Switch with my daughter, but not too much going on. I just got interested in the field of gaming. I've always been interested in it. And then I knew people who were in the industry, both male and female friends of mine who had worked their way up. And just hearing their stories, both good and bad, made me just very curious to know if that was something I would ever want to have a book about. And the more I dug, the tougher it became to make it a comedy. But I hope I was successful, because there's a lot of things, especially now, happening in the gaming industry. If you just look, Google it right now, there's so much happening now with sexism and racism coming out in the workplace, in the video game industry. So I think that when I started investigating in 2016, it was right after Gamergate, before what's happening now. And it just was a fascinating world, both online and just hearing the stories, that I found a very rich world to write about.
Yeah, because it's there were times where it was like the rage was stunning, because you can really relate to how it's done. And I what I love is, when you get something like this, like the tech industry and the gaming industry specifically, where you can, it's such a clear way to show what happens everywhere. But here you have, you have this realistic, almost like vessel to put it in, right? Because that whole, just the way, just the way she's set up to fail, right? And this has happened to us over history, over and over and over again. We're set impossible tasks, and then the answer always is C. I mean, we gave you had your chance and you failed at it. And so women have had to be like this and say, and she has to now succeed at this thing for all the women who might ever want to be in that, in that business. And I just found, it really spoke to me. I was like, girl, you better make this work. Like, it's ridiculous what they're doing, but you have to make it work. Like, we are all invested in it because it's so important that she succeed. So.
It is a lot, because it's not just internally at the company, because there's an issue that happens where all eyes are on her, both externally and internally. So she has a lot of pressure put on her. And you're right. What I wanted to do was to make sure that it was clear that it was in the gaming industry, but these types of incidents that happen in the workplace, and when it comes to these training programs to help with diversity, and these training programs to deal with sexual harassment, and things that are just, performative and not actually doing anything. I wanted to make all of that clear, that happens. And from a woman's perspective, it really, some of it is just a waste of time and money. And can we really focus on what the issues are? There are scenes, hopefully, that, good or bad, you can relate to them, where
I've been there. I've been in that meeting.
Yeah, or when you're in a meeting. Yeah, you're in a meeting and these guys are the ones that are supposed to be doing the work, and you get assigned their job, and you're like, wait, this guy literally has that title, like that. That's actually in his job description. That is actually his job, and you get handed and dumped all this work on you, and you're like, why me? And then when you call it out, you're not a team player. And that is, that type of stuff happens a lot in the workplace, especially in a male-dominated workplace. But I wanted to have those types of things that were relatable, where women could read it, and men actually, and see what it's really like in parts of corporate America. And I worked in the tech space, so that's definitely something you saw there.
Yeah, same. And, I haven't, it's been a few years since I've written full time, but, I worked in the tech industry too. And I've been in that, that inclusive, that diversity and inclusivity training. I've been in that, sexual harassment class. Yeah. It's like, yes, you're not really supposed to do those things. Why is this so confusing?
Oh, no. And I did make sure that some of those were actually inspired by real things that happened. So they weren't so, just made up. Like those, I've been in, through all of my work experience, these types of trainings that are role play or whatever they are. And the scenarios are so ridiculous and not real world, or they are, and it's just people don't get it and know what's happening. And I wanted to make sure that those little things that nod to, just working with other people in a corporate environment are addressed.
And it's hilarious and very relatable, I think. And I think one of the things you do is you temper it with, because he's an intern, you're also, I love, and this makes, I think, even women with feminine rage a little uncomfortable to hear sometimes, but it's really nice to kind of do that equalizing thing where, where she does to him what she has so much anger at, other people doing to her. She what is the word? What is the word I'm looking for?
Underestimates.
She underestimates. Thank you.
Anyway.
She underestimates him because of his label, and she wants people not to do the same thing to her. So I think you do that really well too.
Thank you.
is, it's really well done. Okay, two quick questions, and if you want to go to their questions, Jessica, or ask us yours, I'll stop talking. But do you really hate P.F. Chang?
When I did stand-up comedy, I used to poke fun at P.F. Chang's because it's just as a concept hilarious to me that if you look at a menu at P.F. Chang's, and I have eaten there because I used to say, I kind of had to research it to know what it's about. So a bunch of coworkers we all went out, and the menu is like Cake Factory menu, but just full of Asian food, and it's hilarious to me. I don't hate it. I'll just say that. And that was the question, right?
Yeah, yes. No, I totally get it. I was like, oh, P.F. Chang, and and I love the food, and I love that she loves the food, and it's kind of so stupid because that's how we are. I went to Starbucks the other day, and we had this social distancing. We sat outside and drank our golden sunshine latte or whatever they call it, and it literally is turmeric milk with ginger, which is something my mom has given me when I get sick, like my whole life. And my kids, that's what I give them when they get sick. And so we've spent so much time talking about how awful Starbucks is for appropriating that and calling it a turmeric latte or golden sunshine, whatever. And here we are both drinking it, going, this is actually really good. It's just, I'm ashamed to admit it, but and of course, I mean, you have to laugh at some shit, right? Because you can't. So that was very much that P.F. Chang moment. And I think my favorite thing is she says, I'm not ordering Korean food, not unless there's a $75 bet.
Yeah.
Because she has
to draw the line, right?
I just loved it. I said, you've got to love a sellout. We're all sellouts, because so I loved that. And there's so many moments like that through the book that are just lovely. So do you write is it just when you're writing, is that just the humor, or do you layer humor on top of the story?
I tend to, this current work in progress, I wrote a full synopsis for the first time, thinking I'm going to get this, do it the right way, that everybody's telling me, make sure you have all these goalposts in mind and know where you're going to go. And from the beginning, I have completely not followed that. So I just pick a scene and then I just go nuts on the scene. And the humor just comes in the first draft, actually. And then when I do a second draft pass, when I realize how terrible the draft is and it needs all this rework and it's just garbage, I look for opportunities to punch up the humor. So that's what I do in second pass. But for me, it comes early on, because I think that usually coincides for me with the voice of the character, the way she or he reacts to things in the outside world, and the way he views things in other characters as well, like what comes out of their mouth, hence the immigrant parent being important as secondary characters in this book. So I think overall it's usually early. And then for you, how does your first draft look to second draft and onward?
So my first draft is garbage. So I call it a vomit draft. I hate writing first drafts, like loathe writing first drafts. And the only way I can do it is I have to puke it all out in a really short period of time, because I have, a lot of this in my head and I have to get it out to make it beautiful. So I revise, like it's not first draft, second draft, it's 100 drafts. It's just like I revise the heck out of that thing, and almost all the magic happens in revision, and all the final, like the real nuance and layering happens in the really late draft, sometimes post copy edit. Oh. Like all the little cherries on top happen really late. So my first draft is but you're right, the most connected or magical moments, or things that are important to the story, do often happen in this weird way when I'm vomiting it out. Yeah. I just have to remember not to disturb that sometimes. and humor always is, is in how people see things.
Yeah.
But but every now and again I'll think this is, rarely have I done this, but with this book I did actually make the effort to lighten things a little, because she can be such, or she was really dark in my earlier drafts, because she has such potential for darkness, right, in just by way of her backstory. And so I did have some beta readers or my initial, critique partners say, man, that was almost oppressive, to stay inside her head with that much pain hurts too much. And I was like, ooh, and so I kind of went through and lightened her voice up, which made it more powerful, I think. So I did pull back the internal darkness of her for Ashna a whole lot. And then I also, there were, so there were some places where I knew that I had to make the reader at least smile, and so like the time that and this is a scene that totally cracks me up. I don't think anyone even notices, but and I want to ask you, which of your scenes really cracks you up the most? Because the scene in which Rico squeezes DJ's bicep by mistake, and you have these two really hot, big guys, and one of them kind of without realizing squeezes the other's bicep, and everybody's like, what happened? And it was so ridiculous that it really tickled my funny bone. But that was one of the things where I was like, okay, this scene needs to kind of be a breathable scene, and I need to kind of bring that down and have people at least smile. And so that was so sometimes I will do that because I do heavy topics, and I kind of go, and I did want, there was a lot of active feminine rage in this book, which is all of Shobi's storyline. Is that her mother's storyline is literally my scream at the patriarchy, it's everything that has mattered to me growing up, and so I was able to pour so much of it in there that to be able to say all that, I had to kind of go in and and soften stuff actively, and so so there is some of that. But what is your favorite, most, like, what scene just totally cracks you up in this book?
That's hard to say, because I sometimes the things that make me laugh are just the little things that maybe a reader won't notice. So I have my favorite scene is when one of my favorite scenes is when she's giving her speech at the end, and she's giving it to them, like saying, like, I had all this adversity and you guys didn't help me, and then still the game, overall I was successful at the job. And she's laying it into them, and because this is a game release party, when she finishes this speech, this FU speech, all the balloons come down. You'll get to that. Sorry, that's at the end. So and that's one of many silly things. But it's just little things like that where I knew what I wanted to do. It's just like, how absurd can I punch this up to make it ridiculous and take it up even higher of a notch? So that is one thing that I love doing, is like when seeing a scene and then making it more absurd. And then there's just little things about the characters that I like to do, these little touches. She gets her idioms all wrong, which I do, and I just mix things up all the time. So there's a scene where she gets it wrong and he calls her out on it and she gets mad at him. So little things like that kind of help with the relationship building, but also are just a little nod to things that are relatable to me.
Yeah, I loved it. I think she is just hilarious. Her inner dialogue is my favorite part of the book.
Yep.
She's just says it's just every little thing. She just sees it as so absurdly funny. I love that. And it's a master class almost in how to write humorous inner dialogue. So kudos.
Thank you. I do have one question for you. I know we're like taking up the entire. I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh! Talk.
So I write in first person, and I'm always intrigued when people use third person, and I would love to know if you where you're most comfortable and why. Because your character's still it's not like one takes away any, it's not like a first person or third person would be better or take away. And I just think that you did it so well. And it's different than how I write. So I'm like, wow, how did you do this?
So every one of my books is third person. I naturally write in third person, and I'm exactly the opposite of what you're saying. I'm always amazed because, the first person is a more restricted, because you're 100% inside this one head, and so you can't take off to make make observations about life, or make metaphors about the color, the light in the room, and a mood. It just feels like I'm always amazed at how well authors who write in first person are able to do that, because it is you have just that. I think third person gives you I write very close third person, and I like to read very close third person. So you do it is important to feel like you're inside this person's head, but it gives you a little respite, I think, in terms of, and so much of my storytelling is opining. I always feel like I became a writer, and I written since I was very little, and it was always about letting people know what I thought about things. And so it's just my sneaky way of making sure everyone knows what my opinions on things are. And so, of course, I think my fiction, it leaks into my fiction. And so, it would be interesting to see how I could do that with first person, because I naturally write in third person, and I always have. Because I always think of stories, it might have been what I read growing up, although I'm amazed at how almost in the past, I think, couple years, almost every book I've read has been first person. Oh. And I'm like, am I missing the boat on something? Like, what is going on? It's the trend, but I feel like, the whole once upon a time, like that's my storytelling style, right? In a land far, far away. And that's always like a third person, right? Thing. Yeah. And so I don't know, it just comes naturally to me. I feel almost like I should challenge myself and write something in first person sometime, but I don't.
I'll take the third person challenge too. We'll see what happens.
We should do.
See what happens.
Yeah. Jessica, did you have stuff for us?
We have some Facebook questions because you guys pretty much went through all the questions we were going to ask. So thank you. Good job. 5 stars. So I don't know, Cathy, do you want to read the first Facebook one that I pasted in there?
Oh, let's see what it says. How did your past careers affect your subject matter and writing style?
I could go. So my past careers have been mostly at tech companies. So, and, a few other industries, but mostly in tech. So I think, again, it's male dominated for the most part. And I felt that I did want to write write a workplace comedy, romantic comedy. So I think when I thought about what do I know, that was clearly something that I did know. And then gaming is sort of adjacent. So I was able to do a lot of research around that particular industry, but use a lot of the company experiences from my tech days. Then what was the other part of the question?
How does it affect your subject matter and your writing style?
Oh, the writing style. It's I don't know if it affects the writing style in that I did try to kind of use, I do find it funny when you can use lingo that you would use at a company and everybody knows what they're asking for, but in a comical way. So not like, a boring, like I'm sitting in a meeting and I do a play-by-play. I just wanted to make sure that there are things that happen in the story that for sure this person had worked in this environment, because there's no way you knew that X, Y, and Z happened. Like there's a whole scene about a conference room that they go into that has bad lighting, and also all the chairs are broken, and it's just a matter of which chair you sit in and what kind of defect it has. And I had one of those rooms at a place that I worked where it was like the graveyard of chairs, and rather than get rid of them, they wanted to repair them. And anyway, long story short, that was totally exactly for 100% matched to that experience the first time I went into that conference room. Couldn't figure out the lights because it was broken, and then sat down in a chair and like the handles fall off, or like it just sinks down for no reason. It can't, like you're literally on the ground. The other person can't adjust the back, just all of that was all from real experience. So again, those little comedy touches, I was trying to bring them in because I think people can relate to weird things like that.
Yeah, I love the chairs. I've been in that room too. So there's that. For me, so I have a degree in architecture. That's my, that's my education. I only worked as an architect for a couple of years, and then switched pretty soon to architectural journalism, and then to technical writing. And so kind of I was, nudging my way here. I do feel like in terms of process, and I was actually talking to someone about this the other day in terms of, so design and writing a book, there's a parallel to the process. And I feel like I bring that to my process. And that's why, you start with the line sketches, and the vomit first draft is a thing that you do in both things. And then the layering is, again, at least when I went to architecture school, we actually used tracing papers, the gateway sheets. So we did literally the design grows layer over layer over layer, in terms of even physical paper. And so in terms of process, I think it does translate. In terms of subject matter, I think a lot of my subject matter is, comes from life experiences, and often from, things growing up that were important. And especially with the Jane Austen series, when people, ask me about the retelling, and I say, no, it's actually just inspired by, or it's my homage. What it really is an homage to is the things I learned from those books as a young person. And so, I think I already said this at the beginning, but Recipe for Persuasion is my homage to having learned that it's okay to make mistakes, right? Because I was growing up in this world that was very restricted in terms of timing and the number of chances you got. So there was this whole, culturally, there was this whole once and done thing. So you had that one time. And in fact, my mom's favorite line growing up was, timing is everything. It's, you have to. So when it's time to get into college, if you don't, that chance has gone forever, right? And you're, you will never again get to be what you wanted to be. You have that one chance. You get involved with the wrong kind of guy, your life is ruined, your honor is ruined, no good man will ever marry you. So there was these ridiculous, once and done, you get one chance to get it right. And I think it was books like this, which, when you see it in fiction and you're young and somewhere in your mind, that's crap. That's not how life works. That's not what you're seeing around yourself, but that's what you're being told. And in some ways, that's also being reinforced. But when you see in a story that people make mistakes and there will always be a second chance, that was what this story particularly did for me, that there will always be. And so that's what this story really is about, is putting that in story form. So I think it's not so much, a professional thing, but all the stories are fed by, your life experiences, and usually things that bother you, that you see around yourself, and for me, often it is, just patriarchal behaviors, and, a lot of that I see around myself, and it's a lot of it has become silent. It's not as obvious, and so it's easy to deny. And so to put it in, story form is always really interesting for me, because I'm like, no, it's not gone. Misogyny is not, it's not stuff we're making up. It's not in our heads. It happens in every interaction. It's just gotten really elegant and silent and easy to deny.
Okay, Jessica, let's see. Do you want to choose another question? We have a couple more.
Let's see. I just don't want to take up too much time. We have a lot of Facebook questions, and thankfully some of them got answered by the conversation. So this one is for Suzanne. I love both your books. While one is YA and the other is women's fiction, The themes are very similar and very distinctly you. What is it like to write for two different audiences? Any challenges or surprises you found along the way?
Wow. I guess I should have expected a question like this. But I'm not prepared. I think
Blame Kristen. She asked it.
What's that?
Blame Kristen Rockaway. She asked it.
Oh, Kristen. For the two books that I wrote, I did have a lot of similar themes. The characters, I wanted to make them distinct so that you wouldn't think like, oh, she just has one trick up her sleeve and that's all she can write. The character, the main character in the young adult book, this one is the male is the protagonist, even though it's a rom-com. So I wanted to try something a little different with this one. As far as what I found as different was mainly just to make sure that the voices and for the age categories were authentic and age appropriate. So meaning it's not like a matter of, you know, leveling up or changing a lot of things. Honestly, the heat levels and the type of vocabulary is not too different. It's just making sure that the voices and perspectives were actually realistic for that age group. And the only surprises that I came across was not too many, actually. It's mostly just like how the books are sort of, the audiences are a little bit different in terms of, you know, the who's reading them and then what kind of feedback you get. For young adult books, you have both adults and teenagers reading the book. And so, and then for adult, obviously mostly adults. So with the young adult book, you would get a set of feedback that is totally from an adult's perspective of what they liked and didn't like, or what they thought was great and that sort of thing. And now I'm starting to get the teenagers' feedback, and whether it's through direct message or like parents will message me about their kid reading it. And it's not that different, but it is different enough to say like they appreciate different things about the book. So I'm glad I was able to, you know, hit both age groups that are reading young adult and then adults. Also hopefully able to get the humor right. Sonali, apparently she might be perfect target market for my books.
I am.
Yeah.
Okay, Cathy, I got the next one highlighted.
Oh,
So we can kind of move on to our final questions and close, because
where are we?
we've had you guys.
What,
for
number
so
2?
long. I highlighted it.
You highlighted it. No, you
Oops,
didn't. It's just blinking.
there.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
We're super techy.
What do you, I like dicks.
So that was the question?
No, that wasn't the question. That's my favorite thing about this book. It's just that little, I like dicks. It's just hilarious. Anyway, so what do you hope readers take away from your work?
Sonali, you want to?
I think Sonali should go because Suzanne just talked.
Oh, I agree.
There's so much that's a really, I mean, we
Broad
get asked this
question.
question all the time, and of course, I mean, you know, I honestly want you to change in some way, which is kind of, you know, the best things that that anyone has and reviewers say. I've you know, that's my favorite review, is when someone says you know, to read a Sonali Dev book is to be changed by it, and it sounds extremely like, you know, narcissistic to even say that. Yeah. But by that I mean, you know, when I'm writing, I want to change my mind about something. In exploring it, I want to notice something that I didn't notice before, or that I think about something that I hadn't thought about before. And I think, you know, I want you to walk away from that book feeling like you've, you know, you've traveled somewhere, not in terms of place, but into a head or into a space that was not normally you. And so I want you to kind of question something. and feel a little bit better about yourself. I think that's the, that's the whole point. There's been, just yesterday, it was such a lovely day because I had a few people reach out to me, and I mean, readers reaching out to you is, Suzanne, right? I mean, like
Yeah,
the best
means
thing
the world.
ever. Like, even when they reach out to you and aren't saying the nicest things, it's just, it's still someone's taking, if you don't touch someone, they're not going to reach out to you. And I mean that emotionally. So, but I need sexual harassment training. But I think that, being told that, that I saw myself in Ashna, and it's really weird with a character like Ashna, the number of people who've told me that, I felt that, like, that hits a nerve, which makes me really, hurt for people, but for people to, to read that and then feel like I was able to process that trauma that she processes in the book a little bit because of reading the book is just amazing. Or I had a parent say to me yesterday that, a parent who, who has been through a divorce, who said that, I'm paying a little more attention to what our conversations and how we are handling this. I'm paying a little more attention to what that's doing to my children. That's just, like, for me, huge, right? I mean, to kind of just make somebody just see that, oh, maybe I was so, this was a hard time for me, and maybe I have to stop. And so a lot of people have said, I've kind of rethought how I'm communicating with my daughter. I'm kind of, and so to me, it's that if you see something that is in some way going to, do something for your life, that's just, like, great. Otherwise, I just want you to have a laugh and a cry, but I do really, and a lot of, readers, even a lot of my friends don't, they're like, we're just telling a story. But I do think that as writers, we want somehow to change something about how you think, or about something, otherwise what's the point of spending a year, just grinding those words down. It's so you're able to change a perspective or something.
Good job.
She said it more eloquently probably than I will, but I think from my work, having the background that I have, first of all, I would love for someone to see this as an enjoyable read, in that, it should bring some fun and laughter to your lives. If it's not, then that's not what the intent is supposed to be. But most importantly, I would love for, once somebody finishes the book, to think about the layered themes throughout the book. So again, in both books, I believe I touch on, the power of money, privilege, discrimination, and race. And I think that those themes are ones that I would love for a reader to have read the book and then go, there was more to the book. Either let me think about it, or talk about with a friend, or reread parts of it. And then I've heard from a number of people, because the young adult book came out at the beginning of the pandemic, that they found it a comfort read. And I felt that was like the biggest compliment I've ever thought I would ever get, because I didn't anticipate this book to release in a pandemic, or the second book to be released in a pandemic. So if it's a comfort read, or it gets you through your reading slump, which is also the other thing that I've heard, that they hadn't read for months, and then this is the first book they were able to pick up. That means the world. And I actually just had somebody that won a Goodreads ARC, and they are reading at a hospital, and they said that they brought my book, and it's brought some degree of happiness to them, to their lives. So those things, that is what I want from this book, or both books, actually.
And it certainly is that. I think it's just, deep belly laughs, which is exactly what we need right now. So.
Aw, I got a little teary at the end of that. So I love books that are happy. Okay, so here's the question that I ask for every single one of these chats, and it's my favorite thing. So what is your favorite library memory?
It's like,
So my favorite library memory is my library when I grew up was in a small town in Tennessee. So it was very limited in terms of the types of books, but I remember my mom, we didn't buy books, so we always went to the library. So she would just drop me off and I'd sit there and I would just get all the books I wanted. And that smell of the new books with the pages and the binding, I don't know what it is, but it's that magical library book smell, because it's not in a bookstore, it's just in the library. And I think they have like a Yankee candle that actually has like the the smell, but I that is a smell that you can't replicate. It's just magical. And the other thing that I remember growing up and going to the library, the books that were available that were for like when I went to the library most often as a child, they were called Apple paperbacks or Scholastic Apple paperbacks, something like that.
Yeah.
Yes. So I just tore through all of them. Like anytime they get a new one, they knew to save it for me, because that was like my signal, that little apple, that's the type of book I liked. So I remember those are my favorite memories. They were like contemporary, preteen, maybe teen, like books that were totally geared to my demographic, and just middle school kid or junior high kid just wanting to read a lot of books. I didn't see myself reflected in them as often as I would have liked, but I did find that at least was a signal to me in the library that that's the type of book that I was interested in.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I grew up in India, and unfortunately, we don't have a great national or public library system, and I think it was one of the one of the greatest losses of a childhood. And I was lucky enough, again, it was a matter of privilege. I was lucky enough that my dad was in the military when I was very young, and so the military bases had had messes. I don't know what they're called here, but they had reading rooms and libraries. And my first and I have very clear early memories of and they had this particular kind of slightly dark library lamps, like the reading library, because it's a very colonial culture. Has at least when we were young, when we were young, it hadn't even been 40 years since independence, right? And so the there was still that whole, the library lamps, the dark wood, that whole like smell of mahogany and lemon polish. And I remember that it was like the greatest reward. So if I did anything, if my mom and dad wanted me to do something, it was always like, okay, we'll stop at the library. If you're quiet, or if you're, if you just come with us here, we'll stop at the library. And so it was always that. And I did exactly this. So for me, I think the most wide-eyed moment and I didn't have a whole lot of immigrant angst, because I traveled here when I was young. My dad's brother has been migrated in the 60s. So it wasn't like when I arrived in as an immigrant, when I moved to the United States, it wasn't like, oh, what is this thing? But the thing that was, oh, what is this thing, was the first time I walked into a library. And it literally was like, what is this thing? And the fact that it was free, the fact that there was more than one in the city of Ann Arbor, and and Ypsilanti had like this, just I think it's this tiny little town in Michigan, and they had just gotten some sort of funding, and it is one of the most, so the Ypsilanti Library is one of the most gorgeous, like, and having come from architecture school, just as a building and as a community center, it was just amazing. And so I used, it was my, I almost co-parented with libraries. Like I used libraries so much as a partner in parenting. And it was always, it was always my children's biggest reward. Like the other day, and I have like, they're adults now. And it was always, if you eat your dinner, we can make a quick trip to the library. And we used to do like the ultimate reward was this thing. I had convinced them that there is this thing that, that is really hard. We cannot do it too many times because it has to be really special. And it was called a fest. I don't know where that came, but it was a fest, short for reading fest. And my husband traveled. So it was always the kids and me at home. And our thing was we could go to the library and get a stack, like, as much as you could hold. We would get a stack of books. We'd come home and we'd put lotion on our feet, get under the blankets and read through the whole stack. Like that was our fest. And it was, and the kids were kind of laughing about this because they were like, we loved how the whole thing was you cannot do it every day, like something really special. And we read every day, but to have a fest, which essentially was just slightly longer and foot lotion was involved. It was just, so for them, that was, the magic of life happened when we had a fest before we went to bed.
That is so adorable.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
I love it so much. Okay, Cathy.
What?
You got the closing questions. It's all on you.
Oh, sure. Okay, so our closing questions. So what is next for both of you at this point? I know, Suzanne, you have a book coming. The book you have currently is coming out in August?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, this book.
What
Yeah,
is the
that one.
date? What date does it come out, Suzanne?
August 18th. 18th. The new date. So yes, it's coming out soon. And that one, again, is about a video game producer, Melody Ju. She's Korean American, and she needs to release a video game and is antagonized by everybody. And that book, let's see, that one is out in 2 months, a little under 2 months. And then the book I'm working on now, I just turned in my young adult book. That is another young adult rom-com. That one takes place, that one is about a Korean American who, I guess she's an influencer, and she is sent to digital detox camp.
Oh man.
It's awesome.
And meets special people, special someone. So that is that book. That one just turned in. And then the next book that I'm writing now is an adult rom-com. That one is another Korean American protagonist. She is a female investment banker. I have a thing about tackling male-dominated industries, it seems, in the adult space. So she's an investment banker, female investment banker, who leaves her job, and she packs up and moves back home with her mom in Tennessee to reinvent herself and figure out what she wants to do with life. And of course, she runs into her childhood nemesis and arch rival, Daniel Choi. And the competition just keeps going. So that is that book. And that one, I don't know when that is out, but it is due soon.
I love it. So that's both Korean American characters then?
Yes, that one has both.
Love
So female protagonist, and her love interest is Korean American as well.
I love that. And those are always, and we won't get a chance to talk about this, but I did want to ask you how, whether it was a natural choice to have, a Caucasian hero to your Korean American heroine. But
I wanted to make sure this one, I definitely felt like I wanted to have a Korean protagonist and a Korean love interest, just because I know what I want the subject matter to be about. So that one was a good fit. The other ones I thought were a good fit, given either the city or, the work environment. It just it made sense.
Yeah, I'm imagining best friend moms, for both of them.
Seeing as how I keep veering off script of my synopsis, I'll just write that in, because
let me just give you an earworm.
Your ideas. It's just gonna be crowdsourced book, so just let me know what you guys want in there.
I know. I'll send you the synopsis. Suzanne. My next one, which I just handed in the first draft of, and not vomit draft, but my first, respectable draft to my editor this Tuesday, is the Sense and Sensibility inspired one.
Yes, I was hoping.
And that is Yash's story. So for those of you who have read the oldest son who is running for California governor. So it is this golden boy who is, the oldest. He's, in the first two books, he's literally this, this golden boy. The entire family has, is invested in him, in his, lifelong dream, of running for office, and his whole life and path has, so in the style of Edward Ferris, his whole path has always been laid out for him, and he's never questioned it. And then at a campaign rally, something happens that just totally throws him off his game, and everything turns upside down, and suddenly he's like, I don't even know who I am anymore. And it's kind of that journey of, and of course, there's this, should I even say this? There's a self-help yoga guru, friend of all his sisters, because trust is an issue, to go to someone for help. And so he goes to this, this yoga guru and incense maker. And so the book, my working title is Incense and Sensibility.
I'm so excited.
Oh, I so badly want it. Yes, that one I might fight for. And so, so it's best laid plans just being thrown all over the place. And that's May 2021 is what I'm thinking. We don't have an exact date, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm so
I
excited.
need to catch up. You need to catch up.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last one is basically where readers can find you and where they can get your books.
Yeah, they can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Suzanne Park. I was lucky enough to get my name. And then I think Facebook, I'm Suzanne Park Comedy, maybe. I think that might be it. And then where you can buy the book is at Rip Bodice. I have this from them right there. They are going to be working with me on a pre-order campaign, so definitely order from them.
Yeah, they're lovely. I'm Sonali Dev on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and all of those. And there's like some combination of dots and underscores between the Sonali and the Dev, and so you'll have to look. But it's all there on sonalidev.com, which is the website. I also do pretty light newsletter. Which is my 3 R's, which is a recipe, a recommendation, and a really bad joke. Because my family sends me really bad jokes, and I guess I should, distribute the joy. And so, and also, if you sign up for the newsletter, you get my recipe booklet, because my books have so much to, apparently my books make you very hungry, and
They do.
and cooking is one of my favorite things to do. And so these are specifically my recipes, and the way that they're laid out is there's a recipe per book. So, there's a recipe for every book, and you get that when you sign up. And there are signed copies of, I know that, Ripped Bodice is always a fabulous store. They have all my books, and absolutely order from them. If you are in the Chicagoland area, Women and Children First, Love Sweet Arrow, and Anderson's Bookshop, all 3 have signed copies. And I think with Anderson's, if you wanted personalized copy, they are 5 minutes from me. And so, if you put that in the note, I can go in and sign books specifically for you also.
Awesome, so cool. Well, thank you again so much for joining us and for going over the time. It's just fantastic to listen to you guys talk. And just spending time with us today. I think Cathy has some information.
as both of the authors mentioned, you can purchase their books from the Ripped Bodice bookstore. Their address is therippedbodicela.com. And you can also find their books here at our library if you're a library user, in print and digitally, on our different apps that we have: Cloud Library, Hoopla, and the Overdrive/Libby app. And if you're interested in more free online programming like you're seeing right now, don't forget to check out our calendar on our website, escondidolibrary.org, to see the full list of other digital events that we're going to be having. Because we love to talk to people virtually. It's amazing.
And it's our only option right now. And I want to mention that I host the Between the Covers Romance Book Club at the library. And our August book is Recipe for Persuasion. So if you've read it, you're going to read it and you're going to want to talk about it. August 6th, it's going to be a Zoom meeting, so it's going to be virtual, and we can chat about it and all get hungry together.
You should get a recipe and then give the recipe to the people who want to
have everyone make it.
And they can make it and then eat while chatting.
And then we
You
can
know where
have
to find the recipes, the newsletter.
right.
Right now.
And a really
So
bad
sign
joke.
up for the newsletter.
The
So we hope to
only hope.
So
We
we
did
hope
do
to
that,
see
but-
we hope to see you here Friday, July 10th, for our next live virtual author chat with authors Jamie Paxton and Jen DeLuca. We're going to be discussing gender and representation and chatting about their newest releases. So thank you again to the authors, thank you to Cathy, and thank you everyone for joining us. We hope to see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.